Welcome to the channel. Chapter 3. Once we know how the two inputs create experience, we must learn the specific way in which to affect these in order to achieve our ultimate goal, to gain the capacity to direct our life experience in accordance to our will. In this chapter, we will finally learn the process by which to gain the capacity to direct our life experience as we please, and consequently change the themes of said life experience from those of suffering and dissatisfaction to that of fulfillment. Our ultimate goal is now possible, thanks to the understanding we have gained in the previous chapters regarding experience itself and the inputs. Remember, if we are to meaningfully affect our life experience consistently, gain the capacity to direct it as we please, we must affect the inputs in a conscious manner, with understanding. As a direct result of our lack of understanding pertaining to how experience itself is shaped, we have inadvertently set the direction for our life experience to one that is not in accordance with our wishes. Due to how the process of perspective creates experience itself, where our experience creates our associations and our associations shape our experience, we find ourselves trapped in a self-sustaining loop that results in us continuously having experiences we do not wish to undergo. This loop was initiated due to our lack of understanding. We are living experiences we do not wish to experience, classified as negative experiences, which proceed to establish negative associations, negative in that these are the result of negative experiences, which then lead to further negative experiences. This loop we find ourselves trapped in is what we call the negative cycle. It is aptly named so, seeing as how it not only keeps us from directing our life experience, but also propagates the themes of suffering and dissatisfaction. Note: due to the nature of perspective and how this creates our life experience, we are always trapped in some sort of cycle. Regardless of our actions, we cannot change the process of perspective itself and how it creates our life experience. This will always establish our associations, and these, along with input number 1, will always result in our life experience. The idea, however, is to make sure that the cycle we find ourselves in propagates the direction we wish for our life experience to move toward, while resulting in experiences we actually intend on having, those that bring us joy rather than suffering and dissatisfaction. This is the positive cycle. The process we will learn in this chapter will not only show us how to break free from this negative cycle we find ourselves trapped in, but will also provide guidance in regard to shaping our network of associations in a manner that will promote the direction we wish to move our life experience toward. It would do us no good to repair the damage we caused due to our lack of understanding regarding experience itself, only to find ourselves in the exact same situation later on down the road. We must fix and construct simultaneously. If we fail to establish new associations, we will fall back to our old ones. To the degree that we are able to implement the process into our life experience, we gain the capacity to direct this. Essentially, how we gain the capacity/possibility to direct our life experience is via understanding the process. How we actually direct it is by implementing said process. We will construct our network of associations in such a way that just as previously we were stuck in a negative cycle of experience, we will be stuck, so to speak, in a positive cycle of experience, where our associations will actually propagate our well-being, along with the direction we wish for our life experience to move toward. Instead of our life experience feeling like a never-ending uphill battle, due to us constantly having to fight or surrender to our established associations, Life will simply click, and just as effortlessly as we experience hardship now, we will come to experience fulfillment and joy. Before we dive into the process, we have to understand the conditions that bring about negative experiences and negative associations, since many of the measures comprising the process are based on this understanding. In this way, the reader will be able to understand and follow along with the process. The conditions we are speaking of pertain to the states of suffering, dissatisfaction, and a third state that is soon to be revealed. By understanding the nature of the aforementioned states, along with the dynamic pertaining to the relation among the three, we will be able to grasp the origin of both negative experiences and negative associations. We can think of this as the pre-requirements which we need to cover in order to properly understand the process. Technical notes. Negative experiences. The reason why certain experiences are denominated as negative is simply due to the condition that these are experiences the individual does not wish to experience. Negative experiences are subjective and depend on the specific individual. Negative experiences are comprised of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, just as any other experience. Note: keep in mind that even when we implement the process into our life experience, this does not imply we will not encounter situations or circumstances that currently cause us to have negative experiences. However, when we do encounter these situations or circumstances, we will be better equipped to handle them, and thus the experience will not be a negative one. Negative associations. Associations formed from negative experiences. The three negative states: desire, dissatisfaction, and suffering. Objective: to become aware of how the three negative states result in negative experiences and negative associations in order to comprehend the process, which has part of its foundation based on this understanding. Note: the dynamic of the relation among the three negative states is inseparable from their nature. In order to understand the nature of these, we must understand the relation among the three. What exactly is suffering? If our aim is to understand the nature of the three negative states, and thus how negative experiences and negative associations come about, this query is a great starting point. Contradictory to what most individuals believe, suffering is not a quality or an absolute truth pertaining to reality/the universe. Suffering has nothing to do with reality, as it entirely relates to our experience. Although this is the case, it is not an intrinsic quality of said experience. Suffering can technically be completely vanquished from our life experience, but by no means is this achievable, realistically speaking. In order to understand suffering, we must first understand the root of suffering, along with the means by which it develops. This is where dissatisfaction comes into play. It is obvious that two of the states we are referring to as being part of the three negative states are suffering and dissatisfaction. But what was the third? The third is the root of suffering: desire. The reason for the themes of our life experience being those of suffering and dissatisfaction is due to our inability to direct said life experience, meaning we suffer and are dissatisfied as a result of the contrast between the direction we wish our life experience to move toward and the actual direction said life experience is moving toward. The aspect in this equation represented by the direction we wish our life experience to move toward is desire. Desire is not solely restricted to wanting things, it is much more encompassing. Desire is actually a state of wanting things and situations to be a certain way, having expectations. This is the root/base of the three negative states that ultimately lead to suffering. It is what allots for suffering and dissatisfaction to exist. Without desire, dissatisfaction cannot exist, and consequently, neither can suffering. Desire is what establishes the base for dissatisfaction to come into the equation. When our idea of the specific way we want things/situations to take place does not come to pass, our expectations do not come to fruition, we have the potentiality to fall into the state of dissatisfaction. We fall into this state when, as a result of the above-mentioned situation, a negative emotion arises that we are incapable of controlling, and we find ourselves unable to stop our mind from running wild with thoughts. Both factors, lack of emotional control and lack of control over our thoughts, are required in order to fall into the state of dissatisfaction. Note: the emotion that surges during this happening is denominated as negative, since it is an emotion we do not wish to experience that has the potential to establish negative associations when not controlled. In the state of dissatisfaction, we become a negative association factory, creating these until the negative emotion dissipates and lacks sufficient strength to form associations. Remember, emotions are the key to forming associations. The state of dissatisfaction is where we begin dealing with negative experiences and where negative associations are established. Neither of these things happen prior to being dissatisfied. The emotions that can potentially present themselves at this point depend on the propensities of the individual. These can be anger, sadness, frustration, fear, jealousy, etc. What exactly the negative emotion is does not matter. What does matter is that it is a negative emotion we do not wish to experience that establishes negative associations. What will tend to happen in these situations, which will cause us to spiral into the state of dissatisfaction, is that we will feel the negative emotion and a thought will come into our head, inspired by the negative emotion. Rather than dealing with the emotion, we feel like we have to deal with the thought, and so we try to think of a solution for it, which simply causes us to dive into more thoughts. We attempt to think our way out of a thought. Meanwhile, the negative emotion is what is feeding all our thoughts, even the ones that are supposed to help us resolve the initial thought. We feel like we have to resolve the thought in order to make the negative emotion go away, when it is really the other way around. We chase the rabbit down the hole and we take a ride we had no intention on going on. Note: it is important for us to understand that when we are not wary of our emotions and thoughts, when we lack awareness regarding our emotions and understanding linked to the creation of experience, any time we feel a negative emotion, this will lead us into the state of dissatisfaction, which will find us establishing negative associations and thus having further negative experiences, ultimately propagating the negative cycle. In short, every time we have a negative emotion we do not check, we are propagating the negative cycle. A combination of understanding the situation along with a well-developed awareness for our emotions, the quality of being able to control our emotions, is required in order to circumvent the state of dissatisfaction. The last of the three states, suffering, takes place when we experience the negative associations that were established as a consequence of being in the state of dissatisfaction. In dissatisfaction, we are having negative experiences that are creating negative associations, whereas in suffering, negative associations are being triggered and these are creating negative experiences. What triggers the negative associations is our environment via input number 1. The more we reside in the state of dissatisfaction, the more negative associations we will accumulate, and the more negative experiences these will create. If we lack understanding and fail to develop our emotional awareness as we get older, we will have more and more potential triggers scattered throughout our environment, which will bring us into the state of suffering. Our life is figuratively littered with landmines that can go off at any time and cause us to have negative experiences. Eventually, it gets to a point where there are so many landmines, triggers that set off the negative associations established via dissatisfaction, that we find ourselves constantly having experiences we do not wish to have, and perpetually in the state of suffering. In summary, desire leads to dissatisfaction, which is the state where we have negative experiences and where negative associations are established. The state of suffering comes when the negative associations established via dissatisfaction are experienced as a result of being triggered via our environment. This is how the three negative states are responsible for the creation of negative experiences and negative associations. Note: it must be clarified that we do not possess a capacity to experience suffering, dissatisfaction, or desire. We only have three capacities to experience: feeling, sensorial, and thinking. The negative three states are simply that, states. These states are conceptualizations, terms we assign in order to categorize and understand certain patterns we observe. Each state is a combination of specific thoughts and/or emotions we group together and establish as a state. For example, we do not directly experience something called desire. Desire is a term used to describe what we actually experience, which is simply a thought or series of thoughts that potentially, not necessarily, open the door to dissatisfaction and ultimately suffering. Desire. Both dissatisfaction and suffering are quite straightforward, and their nature is completely entangled within the relation among the three negative states. However, desire, the root of the triad, requires a bit of specialized attention if we are to grasp the nature of this particular negative state. For example, as mentioned above, desire does not necessarily lead to dissatisfaction. It is important to comprehend when desire leads us to dissatisfaction and when it does not. The following scenario will further classify this issue relating to the nature of desire. There are two individuals who desire, for their own company to make $1 million in profit by the end of the year. Individual A has a higher sense of emotional awareness than individual B, and thus is much more emotionally stable. During the course of the year, due to an unforeseen event pertaining to the economy, both businesses hit a slump and the profit margins are nowhere near the expected goal. Individual A keeps their emotions in check and shakes off the entire event, focusing on the future and immediately setting out to see what they can do to ameliorate the situation. Individual B is unable to control the negative emotion that surges within them and causes their fall into the state of dissatisfaction as they allow their sadness to take over. Soon, this individual begins being bombarded with thoughts that begin forming associations due to the strong negative emotion being felt. Individual B has entered the state of dissatisfaction, which in many cases can be a slippery slope that the individual is unable to recover from. This one event can literally annihilate the individual's life due to their inability to keep out of the state of dissatisfaction, lack of being emotionally aware, and/or recover from it. In both cases, it can be said that there was desire, thought, but due to the lack of emotional awareness on behalf of individual B, one example of desire led to dissatisfaction and the other did not. It is important to note that the individual's level of awareness regarding their emotions determines whether the desire leads us to the state of dissatisfaction or not. Author's note: at this time, please turn to the insights and read over Eliminating Desire. Conclusion. Now that we have gained the understanding pertaining to the nature of the three negative states, along with the knowledge of how these result in all negative experiences and negative associations, we can finally dive into the process that will grant us the capacity to direct our life experience as we see fit. When we say that the themes of our life experience will change as a consequence of gaining the capacity to direct said life experience, what this implies is that we will stop having negative experiences, stop establishing negative associations, break out of the negative cycle, and put into place new associations that will propagate the direction we wish our life experience to move toward. The process. We have finally reached the point where we can take all the understanding we have accumulated and learn how to apply this towards the achievement of our ultimate goal, to gain the capacity to direct our life experience as we see fit. By following this process, we will repair our network of associations, meaning we will break out of the negative cycle we find ourselves trapped in while simultaneously establishing the positive cycle. The result of this will be that we will have experiences we actually wish to have, and that our associations will move us toward the direction we wish for our life experience to take, unlike what happens in the negative cycle, which is the complete opposite. The 3 points our process will address so as to accomplish this are the following. 1. Dissipate the already established negative associations. 2. Keep new negative associations from forming. 3. Establish new associations that will propagate the positive cycle. Disclaimer. The process is not comprised of sequential steps. It is understanding mixed in with actionable items and has no particular order. However, this is what will guide us toward gaining the capacity to direct our life experience as we see fit. As such, for the sake of organization, we will develop the process using points. Point 1. Separate the negative emotion from thoughts. Point 2. Be in a state of gratitude. Point 3. Practice self-awareness. Point 4. Control thoughts while experiencing positive emotions. Point 5. Recognize our senses are the gatekeepers. Point 6. Constantly practice non-reaction. Point 1. Separate the negative emotion from thoughts. We actually covered the first point earlier when we were discussing the 3 negative states. However, it is worth mentioning again. It is crucial for us to be able to separate the negative emotion from our thoughts if we are to keep from falling into the state of dissatisfaction, meaning not to try to resolve what we are feeling by thinking our way out of it, but simply by identifying the emotion and letting it dissipate while keeping our mind from creating thoughts. The source of life for any thoughts we have in these moments is negative. So these thoughts will only propagate the negative emotion, fan the flames. Note, what does thinking our way out of it mean? Essentially, that we are trying to place the blame for our negative emotion on somebody or something. This action will only create more negative associations. We must simply allow the negative emotion to pass while controlling our thoughts. In Chapter 4, we will come to understand why many of the negative emotions we attribute to the exterior search within us. We will have our answer as to the source that is to blame for said negative emotions. This is where we avoid falling into the state of dissatisfaction and, consequently, having negative experiences that create negative associations. This is also the manner in which we can avoid the state of suffering and, in the process, eliminate the already established negative associations from our network. Remember, if we do not activate associations over a prolonged period of time, these will simply dissipate. Deal with the negative emotion, not the thought, in order to avoid the state of dissatisfaction. Dealing with the emotion does not imply running from or being afraid of the negative emotion. These are mostly only dangerous when accompanied with thoughts, as this is what causes us to fall into the state of dissatisfaction. Sit with the negative emotion for as long as it takes for it to go away. It is okay. Do not be afraid of what can happen. Remember, do not think while in a negative emotion. Do not be afraid of things that are changing or that will no longer be the same. Remember, do not think while in a negative emotion. Do not be afraid that you will fail. Remember, do not think while in a negative emotion. Note, this is not to say that thinking and analyzing ourselves is something to avoid, but rather that doing this while there is a strong negative emotion present within us will only propagate further dissatisfaction and suffering. Self-analysis and thinking are obviously crucial tools that aid in our development. This is where we turn an objective/analytical eye to our experience and find valuable insight that will amplify our awareness. Timing is everything. Negative emotions that we might not consider to be negative emotions. Anxiety, fear, doubt, different from objectively analyzing possibilities, and sadness. Point 2. Be in a state of gratitude. In the same manner by which we create negative associations when we fall into the state of dissatisfaction, we create positive associations when we are in the state of gratitude. Note: the positive cycle is simply the mirror opposite of the negative cycle. Where in the negative cycle we have experiences we do not wish to experience, and our network is full of negative associations that direct our life experience against our wishes, lack the capacity to direct our life experience. In the positive cycle, we have experiences we actually wish to experience that form positive associations that direct our life experience according to our wishes. We have the capacity to direct our life experience. Download the complete book in order to follow along from the website. The link is in both the video and the channel description. Thank you so much.